The iPadOS 16 public beta is here, and I have a preview for you. And I say preview because it's still in beta. It's still cooking. If you think of it like a cake, it's like only half baked. You're not going to eat a half baked cake. So I have a preview of some of my favorite features, but of course in the fall, like normal, I will have my in-depth detailed walkthrough of iPadOS, of all the features, what they mean for iPad users. And trust me, there is going to be a lot more to cover, but I want to cover the top level features in this video and kind of get into the nitty gritty of them a little bit. A big feature and kind of a theme for iPadOS 16 is desktop class features. Apple went to their teams and said, hey, what is something that is in your Mac app that you would like to bring to your iPad app, but can't because there's a missing API or something that's missing on the iPad that you just can't do that feature with. And they came up with a whole list of things, and there's quite a bit to it. And I just want to cover some of the top ones that I think are relevant to iPad users. So the first one I want to highlight is customizable toolbars and apps like Notes, Pages, Mail. You're going to see an option in there to customize what is on that top toolbar. This allows you to hide things that you don't necessarily need, features that you don't want, or add features that you desperately want that aren't necessarily like popular features that would have normally gone in the toolbar by default. There's also a new right-click menu. So before, whenever you used to right-click on something, you used to get the same kind of menu you would get if you tapped and long pressed on, say, like a word. You would see that cut, copy, and paste menu along with an arrow that would give you a few other options depending on what app you're in. Well, now when you right-click with the trackpad, you get a more Mac-like menu. And so you'll have things like cut, copy, and paste in here, but also app-specific actions as well. So in Notes, you might see something like insert drawing or scan text. But if you were to tap on that same experience, not right-click, but tap with your finger, you would see the old-style menu. So iPadOS is now showing that it adapts to the different styles of inputs that are available. Another right-click option is right-clicking in a blank area. So in things like folders, you can create new folders or get info for the folder that you're in. Kind of typical stuff that you would have seen on the Mac for years, but now that's on the iPad. In calendars, you can right-click in a blank area and create a new event, which is really nice and just really handy. And when you right-click on it, it's going to assume the time that you're right-clicking. So if I was to right-click on Sunday at 7 a.m., it would assume that time. There's now a document properties menu. So you'll see a drop-down arrow that you can click on, and you'll see this in a few different applications along with third-party apps in the fall. This will give you options to duplicate, rename, export, and print. And then the last desktop class feature I want to talk about is Driver Kit. Now, Driver Kit isn't a new thing. This has been on the Mac for a few years now, and basically this has been a secure way for drivers, the hardware drivers. Drivers, for those that don't know, are basically software for hardware. So sometimes you might have like an audio device that you plug into your computer. The computer needs instructions on how to interpret that audio device, and that's kind of what a driver does. So now with Driver Kit, you'll actually be able to install hardware drivers on your iPads. And what's really cool about these is it's the same drivers that are on the Mac. So developers don't need to do a whole lot to bring their drivers to the iPad. Now, it's not just first-party apps that are getting these features, frameworks, APIs. It's third-party apps can adopt them as well. So you'll be seeing these features pop up in third-party apps when they get updated in the fall. Focus was one of my favorite features from last year, and it got a few nice updates, but there's one particular feature I want to call out in this video, and this is focus filters. So what this is going to allow you to do when you enable a focus on iPadOS or iOS, it's going to be able to enable or disable certain features in apps. So some basic examples are like enabling dark mode or light mode, or enabling low power mode. So if you wanted to have like a work focus and a personal focus, you could set it up to what, hey, when I enable work focus, it's dark mode because dark mode is for professionals and working. But hey, when I'm in my personal mode, I want light mode because it's fun and light. You could do that kind of thing. That's pretty cool. Then there's some more advanced stuff. So when I'm filming, for example, I have a tab group that is specific in Safari. I call demo for videos. So what I can do now is when I enable my action focus, it automatically opens up that Safari tab group. You could have something like that for meeting tab groups or whatever. You can enable or disable calendars. So if we go back to the work and personal focus, you could have your work calendars enabled for your work focus and your personal calendars enabled for your personal focus. Then you can also limit people that are available in messages. So the way this works is the people that you allow or not allow in the contacts area of the focus will show up in messages. That's pretty cool, but the nice touch is favorites are always there. So if you have like a family chat group, those will always be available. Then there's accounts and mail, so you can enable or disable accounts. Going back to that work and personal focus, if you have a work email and a personal email, in work focus, you can turn off your personal email. In personal focus, you can turn off your work email. Really cool. So that way, like, hey, I'm on the weekend, I'm not being paid, I don't need to check my work email. And of course, third-party apps will be able to set up their own focus filters. Collaboration is a feature that's coming to all the major OSs, so macOS, iOS, and iPadOS. And I think it's something that's really neat. So in the past, when you have shared a document or a file with somebody, they got a copy of it. They can make their own changes to it, but you aren't going to be able to see those changes. But what's really cool is now throughout the system, and again, this is one of those things third-party apps can adopt, there's now an option in the share sheet. So you can either send a copy of a file or you can collaborate. And you can send this to a single person or a group of people, and you're all working on the same document at the same time. And it's in real time, so you can see what other people are doing and what changes they're making. So if you're in the Notes app and you have a note open and you're making changes to it and they're making changes to it, you all see those changes in real time. And then you can have like a FaceTime call or a message group going on top of that, so you can talk about those changes that are happening, so you can be collaborating, like what the feature is called. Shortcuts got a lot of quality of life improvements. I'm going to highlight a few of these, but Shortcuts is one of those apps that changes a lot over the beta period. So I'm just going to highlight a few things, but I will have a whole separate video on Shortcuts later on. One of my absolute favorite, and this is a big finally for me, the Notes actions now finally support rich text. Can I get a hallelujah? Seriously, this is something that has like kept me off using the Notes app for years because it's a rich text application, but I couldn't send stuff to it via rich text via Shortcuts. It was maddening. But there are also a bunch of new actions as well for Notes. So there is actions for deleting, pinning, changing settings for specific notes. There's also actions for creating, deleting, moving, and opening folders. And there's specific tag actions as well. In Safari, there are options for opening tab groups and creating new ones. There's also a remove background action. So this will use the depth map and machine learning to basically take out any background of any image. Honestly, this kind of like is 90% of what I use Photoshop for, and now it's just like built right into Shortcuts. Like I have a shortcut that just removes the background of any photo and leaves me with the subject. Really cool. This video is sponsored by Paperlike. Paperlike is a screen protector. It's a matte textured screen protector. So what that means is when you're using the Apple Pencil and you're drawing or writing on the iPad, it has a more paper and pencil-like feel. It's a much better feeling to it. And because it's a matte screen protector, when you're working outside or in direct sunlight, it helps cut down on that light reflection. Now, it's not perfect. I've never come across anything that is perfect in working in that situation other than a really, really bright display, but it really does help. There's also a bundle now, so you can get the Paperlike, the screen cleaner, and the Apple Pencil grip. This is a great combo if you're somebody that uses your Apple Pencil a lot. This is just kind of like the perfect trifecta of accessories. I really like the screen cleaner because it just helps keep my screen clean, but it also makes the Paperlike last a lot longer. All right, so it's time to address the iPadOS 16 controversy, and I hadn't made a video about it because I was waiting until the public beta was out so I could show you all the stuff that's in it. But I understand. Last year, the M1 iPad Pro was announced, released. We had it in our hands. I got super excited. I bought one. I bought the 2 terabyte one with cellular. Like, I bought the most expensive one there is. Nobody can say I wasn't excited about it. And then iPadOS 15 came out, and there really wasn't anything that was pushing those M1 iPad Pros. Now, there was definitely apps out there, and I did a whole video about apps that push those M1 iPad Pros, that creative apps like video editing, 3D sculpting apps, Procreate, audio apps, stuff that can really use the power of the iPad. But there wasn't anything on Apple's side that was really using the power of the M1. So iPadOS 16 comes around, and we get features that are exclusive to the M1 iPad Pro. And when I was sitting at WWDC, I was excited because I was like, finally, this makes sense. The iPad Air a few months got the M1 chip. Like, this all makes sense to me. This is the clear direction of the future of the iPad, using these chips, using these features. And some people were upset because they're like, hey, my iPad that's a couple years old, the 2020 iPad is only 2 years old, should still be getting those. And I get it. Apple has technical reasons why these features are exclusive to the M1 iPad. Some people feel they shouldn't be. I'm just going to tell you what it is. I have feelings, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's not going to sway anyone one way or another. I can't make any changes because I don't work for Apple. But if you're curious about, does my iPad support these features? You can go into Settings, General, About, and if it's the 5th generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro, 3rd generation 11-inch iPad Pro, or 5th gen iPad Air, it supports these features. Let's get into those features. So the first feature is reference mode. Now, this feature is an exclusive of an exclusive. It's just for the 5th generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro, the one with the XDR display, aka the mini LED one. And what this does is it takes the screen and it balances it properly. So you have proper, highly accurate color reproduction. So this is for people that do color work, people that are editing photos, color grading, 3D modeling or 3D painting work, or just normal 2D painting work in Procreate or drawing, stuff that is, you need color accurate representation. This is work I do. So I was really excited when this feature was announced because I've been using it for editing photos, and my tests, I've been testing LumaFusion again to see some future features, how LumaFusion is working with them. So this is an incredibly important feature to people that do this kind of work. So it gives you that highly color accurate screen that a mini LED screen can provide. Now, this isn't something you're gonna wanna use all the time because it kind of washes out the display. Like, it doesn't make the display look as nice and crisp and not saturated. It's kind of hard to explain, and it's not going to show up well on video at all, especially considering I color grade my video. So yeah, it's not going to show up well at all. But if you ever get a chance, like if you don't have one of these iPads, you're in the Apple store or something like that, and once iPadOS 16's out, you can go into Settings, Display, and you can turn reference mode on. It's a really interesting look, but it's not something I leave on all the time. But you also can't adjust the brightness, because if you were to turn the brightness up too high on these screens with reference mode on, everything's just gonna look washed out and those colors won't be accurate anymore. The next feature is display scaling. Now, this is something that has been a part of macOS for years. On Retina displays like the iPad or the Mac, traditionally it runs at a lower resolution, but it renders content at a higher resolution. So it makes everything super sharp and crystal clear. Like, you could put your eye right next to it, you are not gonna see a pixel unless you have really good eyesight. But now you can go into Settings, Display, Display Zoom, and select more space. So what this does is it renders everything not at 2x, but 1x now. And this gives you more space on the screen, so you can put up more content, whether you can view more messages in Mail, or you can view a bigger timeline in LumaFusion, or have more like settings open in Lightroom, or whatever you want. This displays more content. And honestly, even though it's running at a 1x resolution instead of the traditional 2x resolution, everything still looks really sharp, caveat to my 31-year-old eyes. If I was still 20, would it be as sharp? I honestly don't know, but I've been toggling it on and off all week while I've been kind of like writing this video and prepping for this video, and I'm like, I can't tell a sharpness difference. There is definitely a big difference between the traditional mode, the traditional retina mode, and the more space mode, because I have more space, I can display more content, and that's what I want, because I can't physically see a downside to it. And again, maybe there is, but my eyes can't see it. I will take the more space in a heartbeat. I did not realize how much space was being wasted on the iPad until now. Virtual memory swap is the next feature, and I couldn't believe they actually are bringing this to the iPad. And it's a big deal for people that are heavy users, have heavy workflows on the iPad. Not just video editors, 3D sculpting, people that are doing heavy audio work, anyone that has a big creative task. Procreate users are going to definitely see a benefit from this. So the idea is, when your computer runs out of RAM, and all computers have a set amount of RAM, using iPadOS 16 and virtual memory swap, it can use empty storage on the drive, on the disk, to use as RAM. So it can move things to that. And because it's using the M1 chip, the storage and the RAM are all on that chip, and it is incredibly fast to talk to RAM and storage. They talk to each other incredibly fast. They can move stuff back and forth, read and write, super fast. It's the benefit of it all being on the same chip. All the YouTubers and tech bloggers and everyone was losing their mind over the M1 chip when it was first announced. The big reason why it was so fast is this, because the storage and the memory and the GPU and everything are on that same chip. So it's incredibly fast to talk to each other. So back in the old days, when you were using spinning hard drives or like first generation SSDs, virtual memory swap, you could really feel it. Like, it was one of those things that it was there so applications just wouldn't get closed in the background when you were doing something else or when you ran out of memory. It was just a nice feature, but it wasn't ever something you honestly felt like you were going to work from. But with the M1 chip, because everything is so fast, you don't feel it anymore. I have all these applications open in the background, and they're taking full advantage of the RAM. So in the past, I've seen people complain about, oh, the iPad apps are limited to only using 5 gigs of RAM, and that was the case for a while, and that was a bummer. But then Apple introduced this intent that certain apps could use, and I like the way they did this, that they could use up to 12 gigs of RAM. And what I mean by intent is apps had to go through and basically apply for this. And I like that Apple did it this way. So like, if somebody was writing a task manager and they wrote it poorly, it didn't just use up all your RAM and start kicking apps out of memory in the background. Like, it was, hey, no, you don't get to go above 5. You're just a task manager. Like, stay down. Like, you don't get to go above 5 gigs. Well, now apps, if they're using that app intent, they can go past 12 gigs all the way up to 16 gigs of memory. So that's awesome. And you can have multiple apps open, so it's using more than 16 gigs. So I could be using a bunch of RAM, and thanks to having a 2 terabyte iPad Pro, I'm not going to feel it at all. Now, if you have a 1 terabyte iPad Pro or a 512 or 256, as long as you have extra storage space available, virtual memory swap will be available to you. Now, it's coming to all of the M1 iPad Pros except one. The iPad Air that has 64 gigs of storage. And it makes sense to me. 64 gigs of storage isn't a lot. You're not going to want to, like, start taking up space and not be able to save something to the disk. Like, you're going to need, I keep saying disk, but it's not a disk anymore. Forgive me, but that's just an old computer term that's stuck with me. So I kind of get why it's not available, but that is a bummer for those people that have that. That being said, it's 2022. Maybe it's time to stop selling devices with 64 gigs of storage. Maybe. But those features I just mentioned, display scaling, virtual memory swap, they're just the tip of the iceberg, leading to something much bigger. and that's Stage Manager. Stage Manager is the new paradigm for iPad multitasking. This brings windowing to the iPad, like true windowing. But like when Apple brought a cursor to the iPad, they kind of rethought it to fit the iPad. They didn't just port the Mac version over. Let's think about how the iPad works and make it fit to that paradigm. Right off the bat, Stage Manager is optional. If you prefer the old multitasking method, it is still there. You can still use it. But I will say I firmly believe Stage Manager is the future of the iPad. You enable it via Control Center. You just swipe down, hit the button, and this moves everything from a full screen mode to a windowing mode. Now it's not just 2 apps open at a time with a slide over app. You can have 4 full apps open at any given time on an iPad. Any one of those M1 iPads. They're not truly freely resizable and movable like the Mac, so when you go to resize a window, it does kind of snap to a grid, and this is kind of where I think like Apple thought about how the iPad works. Instead of forcing every app on the App Store to go back and redesign their app to be able to be freely resizable, they're like, hey, all of these apps have a bunch of different versions, going from the iPhone mini to the iPad 12.9-inch iPad Pro. And there's a whole bunch of versions of scaling in between. So you can scale these apps to a whole bunch of different sizes. And keep in mind, there's vertical iPads, there's landscape iPads. So there really isn't a hard cutoff or like you feel the limitation. I haven't found a good native app that when I'm resizing it, I can't quite find the like sweet spot that I want it to be in. Now, some Electron apps and some apps that are basically like web views wrapped in a container to be an app, they're gonna need some work over the summer, and hopefully those developers can work on them to make them a little better when it comes to being resizable. When it comes to moving apps, they do kind of snap to a position, and I wish this was a little bit more freeform. I kind of get it, but also I do wish these were just a little bit more freeing so I could just move them anywhere. There can be a lot of wasted space on the screen, especially on the right-hand side when it comes to like moving apps around. You just can't quite move an app all the way over into that right-hand side. Like I said, you can have up to 4 apps on the screen at once, and these group of apps kind of like stick together, and they don't have an official name. I've just been calling them workspaces. You can add applications to these workspaces by dragging and dropping from the dock or the app library, and you can also use Spotlight to add stuff to the workspace. When you close an app or a workspace, it moves over to the left-hand side. This is now a recent section, so there's 4 of these. And basically your most recent workspaces and apps live here. Now, what's nice is you can grab an app from this recent and drag it to your current active workspace if you want. If a workspace already has 4 apps and you go to add a 5th, it takes the app that you've used last, so the one that you haven't touched most recently, and it moves it to the recent section. So that way you still have your other 3 apps open plus the one you just added. I really like this concept. So I've been setting up workspaces for writing, so I'll have IA Writer and Notes up, or my video editing because I've been testing editing video on the iPad again. So I've had LumaFusion and a couple of files windows. I've had a reading, research, and communication workspace with Reader, DoMarks, Tweetbot, and Discord. I found this to be a great way to organize apps and like the different tasks that I do throughout the day. Like I have another one that's reminders and calendar. It's just a really nice way to have all of these different apps that I use together in different contexts. Now, a nice touch is you can drag an app to be full screen, just like a traditional, iPad app has been for the last 10 plus years. This will auto hide the recent section and the dock, so you'll have a full screen experience again. Or if you don't want it to be full screen, you could have another app along the side of it as well. I found this to be my preferred way for working with creative apps like Lightroom and LumaFusion. It just makes more sense to have that full canvas. But when I'm like jumping between a task manager and a calendar app and my note-taking app, having those windows just makes more sense. So it's just the paradigms of the way different apps work. You have that flexibility now on the iPad. Something I've been asking for probably years now is a way to pin apps into the old slide over mode. In Stage Manager, there is no slide over because everything can be resized and moved around. So there is no need for a slide over. So this basically kind of gives me what I want because apps remember the size that they are. So if I want to have a small Twitter app open or my 2FA app open and kind of move it into a small, window, I can do that. I don't have to worry about it being this big full screen iPad app on a 12.9-inch iPad Pro anymore. I can just have the small window off to the side. That makes me so happy now because there are so many iPad apps that don't need to be full screen. They're just little utilities that hey, maybe I just need to reference some information from it, or maybe it's just something I'm casually reading off to the side. It's not something that needs to take up the full screen 100% of the time. So like I mentioned, you can move windows around and you do it by grabbing the top bar just like you would on the Mac. You can either grab it with your finger or you can click on it and drag it with the cursor. That's really nice. The multitasking buttons that were introduced in iPadOS 15 are here in Stage Manager, but their functionality has been changed, so it makes more sense in Stage Manager. So the first option is Zoom. This takes the active app and makes it full screen. Then there's Add Another Window, and that takes all the apps that you have open, pushes them to the side, and then you can select an app from the dock or app library to add to that current workspace. Then there's Minimize, which takes the active app and moves it to the recent section. And then finally, there is Close, and this works like Minimize. It takes the active app, but instead of it moving to the recent section, it just closes it completely. So that way it doesn't take up a spot in the recent section. I really like that they added this. I use it a lot for two-factor authentication and other applications that I know I'm not going to need to reference a lot throughout the day. They also added the Command W shortcut, just like on the Mac, so that you can close an application right from the keyboard. The Show All Windows feature has been redesigned, and I really like this new look. So essentially, it keeps your current workspace on the right-hand side when you enable this mode, but it'll show all the windows for the app that you selected on the left-hand side, so you can add them to your active workspace or jump to them. With Stage Manager, you can actually click on the app icon in the recent section to also quickly get to this view. I really like this. One thing I would like to see, though, in the future is a keyboard shortcut for enabling this view for whatever active app is open. Now, if you don't like the recent section or you don't like the dock always being visible, you can go into Control Center, long press on Stage Manager, and turn those off. Now, it doesn't turn those features off completely, it just hides them. So for the dock, you can flick up from the bottom or move the cursor to the bottom and it'll reveal the dock. And for the recent section, you can move the cursor all the way to the left side and it'll reveal those recent apps. Weirdly, there is no way to bring the recent section back with just a finger currently. That might be something that's added in future betas, hopefully. Personally, the way I've kind of settled on using Stage Manager is hiding the recent apps, but leaving the dock open. That way I have more, side-to-side space so I can have more apps open side to side. A benefit of hiding the recent section is there's a lot less wasted space, not only on the left-hand side, but also on that right-hand side that I was talking about. So you can move apps further out. And since I'm keeping apps in workspaces, there's a good chance if I need an app that isn't in the dock, it's in a workspace with an app that is in the dock, if that makes sense. So I can just tap on that app and it'll open it right to that workspace. Or I can just use Spotlight or the app library. There's so many other ways. I do still really like the recent section, but it's just not hard to move the cursor over to that left side, reveal it, and click on something if I really want it from there. And like I mentioned, if I need even more space, I can drag it to be full screen or hit that full screen button and the dock will auto hide. There's a few keyboard shortcuts, but I hope there are more that are added throughout the beta period. But the few that are here right now, I'll quickly go over, is Globe F for making an app full screen. Technically, it's labeled Zoom, but I think of it as full screen. Command M minimizes a window. And then the FN tilde key, that cycles through apps that are just in a given workspace. It does not go outside that workspace. Command tab is still the keyboard shortcut to cycle through everything. But Stage Manager isn't on the iPad for no reason at all. It's here because it also enables external monitor support. Another big finally. I am so excited about this. I've been using an external monitor with the iPad for years in the old system where it was pillar box, so I had 2 black bars on the side. It was a heartbreaking scene to every time I plugged my iPad in. It was just like, oh, okay, but I wanted a more ergonomic desk setup, so that's why I did it. But now true external monitor support is here. It runs Stage Manager. Now, what's interesting is you can plug a monitor into an iPad and leave Stage Manager off, and Stage Manager won't be on there. But Stage Manager is always active on an external monitor. You cannot use the old multitasking system on an external monitor. So what monitors are supported? First off, up to 6K resolution. So if you really want to go wild and get Apple's 6K, the Pro Display XDR, you absolutely can. But I'm going to stick with my studio display. Ultra-wide monitors are even supported. So you can use an ultra-wide monitor. If that's what you have, you can use it. I kind of wish I would. I basically gave away my LG 5K 2K. Kind of wish I wouldn't have done that because it would have been great to test with. But oh well, it's gone. I'm not going to buy another one. But I have seen images and videos of it running on ultra-wide monitors, and it does totally work. You can also put 4 more apps on the screen. So you can have 4 apps on the iPad and 4 apps on your external monitor, bringing a grand total of 8 apps running at a given time. That's awesome. It has been phenomenal. So like I've been sitting there working and I'll have like my task manager up and my text editor and notes app, and then off to the side I'll have Discord and Tweetbot and Reader and like have 2 marks over here, and like it's just awesome to be able to jump back and forth between all these apps. And they each have their own recent section. So you have 4 recents on the external monitor, you have 4 recents on the iPad. And when you're using an external monitor, there's an extra multitasking button to send an app to the opposite monitor. So if something is on the iPad, it'll send it to the external monitor, or vice versa. And there's a keyboard shortcut. Globe Control / will send an app to the opposite monitor again. So if it's on the iPad, it'll send it to the external monitor. It'll send it from the external monitor to the iPad. Now, there is no clamshell mode, which is kind of unfortunate. So if you're planning on using your iPad with an external display, you have to use both displays. I mean, I guess you don't have to look at the iPad if you don't want to. You could just focus on the monitor. There's nothing forcing you to look at the iPad. It would be nice if you could close up the iPad. I'm somebody that prefers to just have a single monitor because I get distracted easily. I can be like, oh, hey, what's this thing over here? I prefer just having a single monitor, but it's not the end of the world. It's really not. I think this is the flexibility of the iPad that I've been talking about for years, finally, truly, fully imagined. So I've been talking about how the iPad is a tablet, and then a notebook with the Apple Pencil, and then a laptop with the Magic keyboard, and before that the other keyboards that I can't remember the name for. And then I was like, yeah, you can plug it into an external monitor and use it as a desktop when it was, had pillar box. But now with true external monitor support, it can also be a desktop. It covers the whole plethora of different computers right there, which is really exciting. And honestly, I just feel like I can work faster on my iPad with all of these different windows and different configurations and modes that I can be in, and be able to make it app full screen and then tiny. And I just feel like I can jump through my work quicker in this new multitasking paradigm, especially with external monitor support. Now, the question I get asked most over the summer, should I install the beta? Honestly, it's up to you. I'm just going to say, first, this is a beta. Stuff can break. There are going to be bugs. Stuff is going to crash. There are apps that are not going to work properly. I've heard some stuff about the Microsoft Office apps not working properly. I haven't tried it out, but I have heard some stuff. So if you're not willing to put up with bugs and crashes and apps not working right, then don't do it. If you can't put up with that, don't. Second, just because something is working in one beta doesn't mean it's going to work in another. Classic example for me, iPadOS 13 beta. Mid-July, exporting videos just stopped working for me. I could not export videos from LumaFusion for a couple of weeks, which luckily at the time, YouTube was not my full-time job. Making videos was not my full-time job. So it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to take a break and I'll come back to this when I can. Now that would be just detrimental to me. Now, I know not everyone's a video editor. That's an example. So if you rely on your iPad or iPhone or a Mac as your main computer, as your main work device, maybe don't install a beta on it. Like if you need that device to make a living, to make your paycheck, maybe don't put a beta on it just because, you know, it could break at any given point. It's not stable. But ultimately, the decision's up to you. I totally understand. It's the shiny new toy everyone wants to play with. That decision is totally up to you. So that's it for my iPadOS 16 preview video. This video went a lot longer than what I thought it was going to be, but there is a lot of good stuff in this release, and there is a lot of stuff I haven't talked about. So be sure to subscribe because I will have my iPadOS 16 walkthrough video out in the fall. I'm also gonna have a few other videos that I plan throughout the summer around iPadOS 16. And this year, I'm also going to try and do an iOS 16 walkthrough, a macOS one, and if there's time, a watchOS 9 one. I'm busy this summer. It's a real big summer. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.